Welcome to Retained Search, the podcast, where we lift the lid on what it's really like to work retained, discuss the stories we've gathered along the way, and give you all a peek behind the scenes of our amazing community and how they're getting ahead. Nice to have you here, Candice.
Thanks.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for listening. Thanks for tuning in. Welcome to the Retained Search show. I'm joined today by Candice Bourne. She is a wonderful example of a unique rec-to-rec, and I'm really excited to talk to you about retained in the rec-to-rec market today. But first, tell everybody a bit about who you are and your business, Candice, if you will, and what you do.
Yeah, of course. So Bourne Consulting is my business, purely, as you mentioned, in the rec-to-rec, or I call search-to-search space. Established it 18 years ago now when I had my first child. And basically, yeah, he's literally going to university this next week. So it's kind of grown with him, really, the business. So I wanted to work in a firm where I could work remotely. At the time, that wasn't a thing 18 years ago. Previous to that, I worked for a large global contingent staffing firm, Adecco. So I sort of started as a temps consultant, worked my way up to becoming like an ops director there. So I was very traveling around the country and into Europe and that kind of thing, which wasn't really, for me, conducive when I had children. So I set this business up more on a lifestyle type of basis 18 years ago, in the recruitment to recruitment space. Started as a contingent recruiter, went back to being, doing recruitment because I hadn't done that for a long time at Adecco. I was more into the management and sales training side of things. And really, yeah, the business has gone from strength to strength, and it's evolved over the last few years to being a retained search to search business.
Yes, well, tell me about that. So I wanted to find out a bit about what drew you to that model. And I want to talk about how it fits into the rec-to-rec or search space. So first, when we talk about search to search, who are you sort of serving then? Who are your clients? And how are you serving them? If you just put some context around.
Most of my clients, my typical clients, tend to be SME search boutiques.
Okay.
Rather than the global search firms. The sort of smaller boutiques, the owner-run search businesses, I work really well with because I work closely with the owners, the CEOs of those businesses, and they tend to want to partner in the way that a search approach lends itself. Whereas I find with some of the sort of more global businesses, they bizarrely don't tend to retain as a
even though
they
process. Themselves are retained, of course.
Yeah. So most of my firms, some of them are global, but they're more, boutique businesses.
And at what point were you drawn to the retained model, and how did that change happen for you?
So my first few years of doing recruitment to recruitment, most of my clients were contingent recruitment firms because that's where I come from. That's where my network was. And then as the business progressed, I sort of focused more on search clients becoming my clients. And it was really through getting to know them and how they worked that I understood more about the whole search process. And some of those clients were good friends of mine or became good friends of mine. And, I spent a lot of time talking to them about the search approach, what that entailed. And it became really clear to me that, having a list as, long as my arm of vacancies in recruitment, because let's face it, everyone's hiring good recruiters. And trying to make, I did pretty well at making contingent placements, but it didn't feel like I was giving the kind of service that I wanted to give. And I quickly understood through placing search partners in firms what they did and the difference in that service and the quality of service it's what I aspired to be doing, really.
Interesting. And how is it different, do you think, in rec-to-rec? Is it different?
Yeah, I mean, it's almost so different. It's like to me, it's a different industry. It's a different approach. It's not transactional. That's the main difference. If I could maybe articulate it in that way, it's much more about forming long-term partnerships where it's about the process involved. It's not just filling a job.
And
Um,
do you think, do you, because a lot of people say to me, and I speak to quite a lot of rec to recs, and
yeah,
they say, I can't see how it would work. I can't see how working retained would
yeah,
work in my sector, i.e., in the rec to
yeah.
rec space.
Some of my clients have said to me they think it's probably one of the hardest spaces to be
Right.
retained in. And
Yeah.
obviously, because it's all I've done, but obviously I know what my clients do. Potentially they're right. It's ultimately it's very hard work with candidates because it's all about being proactive, isn't it? And approaching them and convincing them to talk to other search firms when they're in the market themselves, right? So it's a bit like a busman's holiday in a way. But you have got to really, it's like anything when you're doing search, you've got to really understand what somebody's drivers are to be able to encourage them to have a conversation. And that takes a lot of insight and ability to engage with people and gain their trust and build their relationships, where transactional contingent rec to rec is just not like that. It's much more, do you want a job that pays you a bit more or, it's not as in-depth at all. So it's so different.
Yeah, I think the objections I hear from rec to recs are that when I lead with the candidate, basically, that's normally what they tell me, and that they'll work with the candidates rather than the clients.
Yeah.
And so that if they've got a good candidate, there's no way that they're only going to send them to one client.
Yeah.
That their whole business model is to give that candidate the choice of all the opportunities in the market
Mhm.
rather than, I mean, of course, that makes perfect sense because if they're not actually being paid or commissioned to find somebody, then they don't
Mhm.
have alliances with anyone. And actually, the fee is the candidate, not
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
client, really.
Yeah.
And for me, that's always been more prevalent, well, in two spaces. One is the rec to rec space, and the other is the legal private practice for partners. I find that market very, very similar in
Oh,
that
really?
most businesses will make room for a good fee earner. They don't necessarily have to
Right.
even have
Yeah.
a vacancy. If someone comes along that is
Yeah.
perfect and got the right experience and able to bring a book of business or a desk or whatever, then they'll
Yeah.
make room for them. So they don't need to sort of or want to kind
Yeah.
of put all their eggs in one basket. That's always
I
the
think, yeah, I
objection
think
I get.
the key difference is, and it's probably the same in the legal private practice market as well, but a really good candidate in search is never actively looking, right?
Mm,
So if you have a very good, partner billing a lot of money in a search firm that's passively looking only and could only be interested passively, they're not going to want
mm,
to speak to five different firms,
mm,
six, seven, or
mm,
whatever, however many different firms. They're going
mm,
to only be interested in having a conversation at a firm that's really going to make a difference to them.
mm. Yeah, good. Great answer. I love it. And personally, I mean, I did some rec to rec in between various other bits and
Right.
pieces. And as you know, because we've talked about it before, and I did it all on a retained basis. And so I
Yeah.
know that it lends itself beautifully, of course, to the retained model. And it's fine for those people that their business model is leveraging candidates and is having the relationship with the candidate and giving them, all of the different options. That's fine. But
Mm.
I've always worked really well in the same way as you have in
Mm.
partnership with the
Yeah.
client that's looking for someone
Yeah.
specific.
And
I
of course,
have
there's always a
found, go
candidate
on.
though that, sorry to interrupt you, but there's always a
No.
candidate that maybe I've had them in the past, like maybe an old client of mine that was actually thinking, I want to see what the market's got to offer,
Mm,
Can you show me, they don't just want to talk to one firm then. And then of course I would work with that particular individual in a different
yes.
way,
Yeah. Yep.
but
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
occasional. That's not my,
Exactly. And it's not actively working on positions for
no,
clients without
no,
any financial commitment. Yeah, which is something else entirely. Yeah. And I completely agree. And those two things tend to feed each other, don't they? Because you find people that want you to work proactively with them
yeah,
whilst you're looking for the people that
yeah.
you need for your client. Um, What have you noticed about the market, Candice, then, in the types of recruiters and the types of people that your clients have been looking for in the last, 6, 12 months?
Um, I think that this year, well, probably since last September, yeah, exactly a year, the market in our world has been really tough.
Right.
There's been a lot of retraction generally in the markets, particularly the UK focused markets. Um, so that whole area of, delivery, associates, head of research type roles, I haven't really heard of many of those being proactively recruited for. I have been retained on those previously, but certainly not this year. It's much more around focus on originators,
Yeah.
people that can bring client relationships to the table. There's always going to be a need for those, but that's been much more prevalent than anything else this year. And that's cross sector. Tech seems to be coming back. And I do think from this month, actually, everyone seems a lot more positive. So hopefully we're moving into a much more active end of the year as well. But tech is definitely coming back, which has been really quiet for a good couple of years.
Do you see a need for a more diverse skill set or background, um, origination of work in, allied services like mapping, pipelining, or leadership advisory and consulting services?
Mhm. Yeah, I think a lot more firms are diversifying into those areas, interim
Mm,
as well. A lot of firms are realizing that having different spokes to their wheel kind of thing
mm,
is going to like really recession proof them for future. So I think
yeah.
that will be a growth area for sure.
Are you enjoying this so far? Don't miss a single episode. Hit the subscribe button right now so you can be part of the conversation that's shaping the future of recruitment. So, we dive really deep into the strategies, the stories, and the truth about retained search. So, if you want to hear more about it, or you know someone else that needs to hear this, then share it with them. Right, let's get back to the good stuff.
Um, what do you think the recruiters are looking for when you find a good originator,
Yeah.
uh, especially for retained work, right? And I know this because people ask me for them all the bloody time. Um, I've got a bit of a conflict of interest though, so I can't always help. But when someone's looking for that profile, how can they make themselves attractive to that skill set? What do these people look for in what's the destination employer for them?
It's quite a mixed bag because it does depend obviously on the individual and everyone is different in terms of what they want. But the generic themes that I come across are things like the brand actually has to be good. If the brand may be unknown, which is fine, but if it's known and doesn't have a great reputation for things like attrition, then that can be a non-starter to get people interested. So, any search owner out there that's, struggling to find partners, if there is stuff, say, on Glassdoor or just generally in the market that needs to be addressed, then I would urge them to look at those things and be prepared to be proactive in this narrative that they articulate to the market on maybe what historical context around negative feedback. But yeah, branding is really important. And client network and client, the perception that company has within their client base and who they're working with as well. If companies are happy for me to share some marquee clients, that always helps encourage people to have conversations.
Where do the best originators in business development strengths come from, do you think? Where do you see the best people coming from? Is there a trend or a hotspot?
I think people, as a generic kind of thing again, because there's always big exceptions to any rule, but people that have sometimes come from, say, a contingent background into a boutique search firm tend to be able to cope with going and setting a cold desk up somewhere. People coming from a Shrek, own only a Shrek that have come up through, say, research, tend to have less exposure really to business development. Doesn't mean they can't do it, but they won't be as trained, and they won't even maybe always be aware of how much they rely on that brand.
Yeah, I've experienced that so many times.
Mm. Mm.
Um, have you had any standout successes?
Yeah, I mean, over the years, quite a few, I guess. In
Tell
fact, the
me
ones that
about
really stand out.
tell me about where the retained model has produced a result that maybe wouldn't have otherwise been produced.
So, I mean, a couple that spring to mind, funnily enough, both international ones, because they were like brand new markets that we were retained on. One was to find a head of financial services in the Middle East, in UAE, which we successfully did. And that was on a retained mandate that we had with a business. We were doing a lot of work on a rolling kind of retainer basis. We successfully found that person. We hadn't done a search there in a long time, so it was a proper start from scratch. And he's been there, a good few months now and really successful. Another one, actually, a bit of an older one, but we were retained to find. It was a search consultant for a CFO practice for a boutique search firm. We found him, and he's been in the company a few years now, 3 or 4 years, and he's now gone on to open their New York office for this search firm, and he's doing so well there. So it's
You
amazing to
tend
see
to
someone.
get a much longer tenure and a better fit, don't you, as well, when you're hand picking and carefully hunting for the
Yeah.
right fit. If you had to predict what was going to happen to the rec-to-rec market over the next few years, what do you see? What changes do you see on the horizon?
I haven't seen huge change for a long time,
Mm.
really, which is quite interesting. Um, I haven't felt much innovation either out there. But then, to be honest with you, I'm not tracking my competitors. I'm obviously not supplying my competitors. So that's probably a bit of a generic statement as well, because I'm sure there are parts to that. I mean, there's businesses that seem to be doing incredibly well that are focused in the US and doing most of their work there. I'm thinking 15 West for one. So I think that market is still growing hugely, and I think that's probably. And I mentioned the Middle East. The growth in Saudi. I think recruiters will really benefit from focusing globally going forward. I think I can see some big changes there.
And you see a lot of candidates. You see a lot of us, a lot of recruiters. You talk to a lot
Yeah.
of recruiters.
Yeah.
And you also talk to those that are looking for the best ones.
Mhm.
What advice would you give to those that are considering a move, and specifically from a contingent with a contingent background into a retained future?
Okay, so a consultant that's in a contingent firm that wants to get into search.
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing I would encourage them to do is really understand and speak to people in search to understand why it's different, what it looks like, to recognize that they might need to initially take a little bit of a step backwards or perceive to be backwards, but it isn't really, because they'll still be learning a lot, because the delivery side of search, there's so much more to it compared to contingent. And they need to really hone their skills on that in order to be able to sell it, I think, effectively.
Couldn't
Personally,
have
that's
said it
my
better
view.
myself.
Yeah.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And when it comes to the other side, then, what advice would you give to those firms that are looking to make hires? Obviously, in this market, everyone is if they're making hires, they're making them very carefully.
Yeah.
And we're not hiring en masse like we were a few years ago and hoping that some of it works out.
Yeah.
And mainly people who can bring value very quickly. So what advice would you give to those people? What are your top tips for them?
So I always advise my clients when I'm working with them that because of our approach, when we introduce people to them, these people aren't necessarily actively looking. So the initial conversation I always recommend is very much almost an informal getting to know you chat. And it's all about building that understanding, that rapport, that relationship, and going into it relatively patiently because, as much as clients aren't in a rush to hire, a lot of candidates are very cautious, understandably, in this market. So going into it with a bit of a longer term vision, it may not take that long, if the connection is there and all the boxes are ticked on both sides, and that's obviously where we come in to help make sure that happens. But yeah, not to rush things, to take time accordingly, to go at the right pace of the candidate, really.
Yeah, very good. Excellent advice. Excellent advice.
Yeah.
Very good. Very wise words. What else would you like to share? Is there anything that you want to share with our audience that you think is helpful, or that we've missed and haven't talked about today?
I think probably the main thing I want to share is the fact that I've launched a podcast myself. Actually today, our first recording goes out. So where are we? The second week of September.
Amazing.
So
Congratulations.
thank you. I'm very excited about it. Slightly nervous, but it's all good experience being a guest on one as well. So thank you for that. But it's called The Journey of a Search CEO. And I basically got the idea to do this podcast from one of my candidates, who does his own podcast series and was telling me how it's really changed his whole mindset on his business and his, the ability to network. And also for me, I quite like, because I've been doing this quite a long time, giving something back to people a little bit, just creating content that's actually meaningful and educating people. So, you mentioned about people making that transition from contingent to search. There is a bit of a mystique around search, and I love the idea of being able to help demystify that. So this podcast series is me interviewing search owners and founders and CEOs. And so far I've done about 10 interviews, I think, ranging from the global CEO, Larry Hartman of ZRG,
Amazing.
to the founder and CEO of Society, which goes out today, actually. So a purpose-led search firm. So a whole range. I'm trying to get lots of women on there, promoting leadership, senior female leadership as well. And really, it's so interesting, actually, the ones I've done. As I said, I've done about 10 or so, but some themes are coming up. Like the same themes are coming up in all of the conversations, the future of search, the impact of AI, the role of a researcher, how that's going to evolve. And it's just really interesting to hear all their different individual stories. And, everyone's got into search in different ways. And I kind of just want people to realize that you can be a founder, a CEO of a search firm if you want, like Larry started ZRG from scratch. It can be done. And I really hope it inspires people.
Good, lovely. And I know that we'll promote it with you too, and we'll share, of course, this one. And I know that we've got some guests in common. Lucy, you mentioned Lucy Robinson, who we adore, and there's so much to be learned from her and all the others, of course. So congratulations. I know how nerve-wracking it is to begin with. Me and Jordan were terrified when we first started ours. I don't know what it must be like to do it on your own.
Listening to yourself for the first time, it's horrendous.
I know what that's like. Candice, I can't thank you enough. You've given such wise words to our audience today. Thank you so much for joining me, and we're looking forward to sharing the journey with you, and good luck with the podcast, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks, Louise. It's been a pleasure.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Bye.
Well, that's another episode of Retrain Search, the podcast in the bag. Thanks for listening to our wild tales, LinkedIn controversies, and our top tips on how to sell and deliver retained search. Get involved in our next episode. Send in your questions and share your experiences with us by emailing podcast@retrainedsearch.com. And don't be shy. Connect with us on LinkedIn and come and say hi. We don't bite. Unless you're a Shrek firm, that is. We want to say a special thank you to our retrained members for sharing what's working for them right now and innovating new ways to grow and evolve. It's an incredible community.
If you're wondering what exactly we mean when we mention our communities, well, we have two separate programs. Our Search Foundations program is for recruiters who want to learn how to sell and deliver retained search solutions consistently. And we have our Search Mastery program. That's for business leaders or owners already at 50% retained or more and looking to scale and grow and structure their search firm. We cap memberships to these programs to protect the integrity of the community. If you want access, just talk to us. Okay, thanks for listening. We'll be back very soon with another episode of Retrain Search, the podcast.